Well, fair enough. Shall we move on to something that we hope is a bit more competent? I mean, it won at Cannes, so what? Surely, Once Upon a Time in Anatolia must be much better.
Your tone suggests you don't think so, but I do, so I guess that's at least one of us. Nuri Bilge, and my apologies for any Turkish speakers on that terrible, I'm sure, pronunciation. I have no idea how to pronounce Turkish for the most part. Once Upon a Time in Anatolia, Bir Zamanlar Anadolu'da, begins inauspiciously enough with three men sitting in the office of a tire shop, drinking, eating and laughing, though an ominous roll of thunder attracts the attention of one of them. We then move to a roadside fountain as night falls, small and inconsequential amongst the vast openness of the Anatolian plateau. Three cars come into view from the distance and stop near the fountain. Numerous men spill out, including two who have their hands bound. The situation, and perhaps the title, suggests that something very bad may be about to happen to those men, and that they are about to become part of the landscape. It's almost the opposite, in fact, as if something bad has already happened, and those accompanying the bound men are police officers and prosecutors, and the men themselves there to show them where a body is buried. Well, if only they could remember just which fountain, by which road, by which tree they buried it. The group travels through the wet and windy Anatolian night, moving from one potential burial spot to the next, and we begin to learn a little about the personalities and lives of those in the party, principally in the lead car. The pensive young city doctor, Semal, Muhammad Uzaner, ill-tempered police chief Nasi, Yilmaz Erdogan, food-loving Arab Ali, Ahmet Mumtaz Taylan, again apologies, as well as later Taner Birsil's prosecutor Nusret. In the backseat of that first car, though, one face is shrouded in darkness while the others are lit. When he leans forward, we can recognise him as one of the men from the tyre shop, and can surmise that things did not go well for one of those three we saw at the beginning. This man, Kenan, Firat Tanis, is the group's main focus as he leads them from one potential gravesite to another, always claiming that he can't remember, whether due to the fact it's night time or that he was drunk at the time. A tired and frustrated group, and an increasingly irate Chief Nasi, call upon the mayor of a small village for refreshments, where an unexpected encounter has a profound effect on many of the party, and the film changes gear, leading to Kenan divulging the location of the grave, the body's recovery, and its subsequent autopsy, where a further discovery is made. In this portion of the film, Dr. Semal comes to the fore, and he must make a decision about whether total honesty is to be desired in all matters. Once Upon a Time in Anatolia has no great drama, and no great action. Instead, we travel with some people, and learn about them as they do an unpleasant job, discovering things as they do, including some sad truths brought to light by the questioning of an anecdote that was originally meant to illustrate something along the lines of, well, it's a funny old world, isn't it? The final act is more focused, and the main characters become only the doctor and prosecutor. The truth behind that anecdote is discovered, and during the autopsy, the rather melancholy doctor must decide in which way best to interpret first do no harm. Throughout, the characters and story are given time to breathe and expand as the film meanders through the countryside, and we can develop empathy for those unremarkable but profoundly real and human characters. Even Kenan, whose gaunt and haunted visage perforates the film, a hugely memorable performance from Firat Tanis despite having no more than a handful of lines. If there's a complaint, it's the all too common one of being almost exclusively male, and from the male perspective. Though this is tempered as a criticism of the film, though not the situation, as likely being very representative of the society from which this film comes. Apart from two ill-defined women in a farm building at night, and perhaps a handful in the crowd in town, this film is populated by men, with two notable exceptions. One is the widow of the murder victim, the other the daughter of the village mayor whose house the search party visit. Sadly, that young woman herself is not much more than a MacGuffin, but the sight of her striking and youthful beauty, so unexpected in that place and during their search for a corpse, seems to have a profound effect on many of the men. Undoubtedly, desire is one aspect, but it may not be, and probably is not, the principal one. Kenan seems particularly affected by her, and it's not long after the encounter that he finally gives up, without further prevarication, the certain location of the grave. The prosecutor, and especially the doctor, are particularly affected by her too, and the feelings of waste, lost youth, unhappiness, regret, and loneliness are almost palpable. Once Upon a Time in Anatolia is an at times mesmerising film, beautiful and complex, with even the landscape itself both informing the characters and acting as one. What seems at first to be a police procedural becomes a character study of Turkish manhood, with some political points for flavour. Where it has the potential to frustrate is in never adequately explaining what happened or why. We get snippets and can make conjectures, but all is left ambiguous. Beyond that, though, it's great. So then, Scott, tell me why I'm wrong.
Right, I really enjoyed the first hour or so of Once Upon a Time in Anatolia. I think that it's quite mesmerising at the start of it. All the driving through the desert, the night landscape, the way it's lit, and the way it's shot is really quite beautiful in a sort of desolate kind of way. Mm-hmm. And I was really getting quite involved in what exactly is unfolding here, what's the story, what's going on, yada yada, and all that stuff. But then it just kind of never really developed into anything for me, and I've kind of lost the thread. I think I lost the thread pretty much entirely at that point that you thought was so captivating. I think from what you're saying there, when they have the encounter with the one beautiful girl that seems to change their perspective. It's like, why? It's a girl. What's the deal with that? And I think what perhaps got me more is the point where I realised that the actual narrative here isn't going to be developing into anything of what I was more interested in, but it's instead going to focus on the interplay between the doctor and the prosecutor. Mm-hmm. And I just didn't really care enough about either character to get particularly invested in either. I didn't dislike it. I think perhaps I'd built this up because this has kind of been on my list of things to catch up with since 2011 when it.
Yeah, it was on my list of similar things too.
Yeah, so I'd been in a way looking forward to it for quite some time, and having finally carved out time and inclination to watch it, and it's just all right. I wasn't particularly affected by it. It didn't engage me on any level. I suspect if I'd watched it again, and if I'd saw it in a different mood, then perhaps I would have got a little more from it. I kind of swung back and forward thinking about whether I would have got much more out of this had I saw it in a cinema setting as opposed to being at home, because the kind of scale of it, certainly at the start, might help draw it in. But I don't know, you could make the same argument about many of the other films we've spoken about today, particularly the first two Leone films, and I still love them, despite having watched them at home. So, yeah, not sure. It's perfectly fine, but I just can't find... It didn't move me in any way, so I can't really see where... I've read a few reviews about how they're moved by the characters and these things, and they just never connected with me on any level, more than appreciating that there's a number of pretty good performances, and obviously there's a lot of naturalistic stuff happening there. The characters are believable and real, but they're not interesting. I just didn't really feel any empathy for them because I didn't really get so great a handle on what they're going through. Some really great performances, particularly by the prosecutor. I thought really nailed the character, but it's just not a character that I cared about in the end of the final analysis. Yeah, it just didn't grab me, which is a bit of a shame. And I don't have an awful lot of complaints with the technical levels of it. It's very well handled and shot, but just at the end of the day, the stories, the characters just didn't add up to anything to me, and was a bit of a... I would say, as I say, I enjoyed it well enough. I wouldn't want to put anyone off it. It's not like I thought this film was terrible. It's, despite what I implied earlier, it's leagues ahead of Once Upon a Time in Mexico. But I was just a little bit disappointed. It just didn't do much for me, which is a bit of a shame.
Yeah, I didn't find any of the characters particularly interesting, at least in a typical film drama sort of way. Mm-hmm. Perversely, I kind of think that's why I liked it, though.
Yeah.
Because it wasn't like they were non-entities or anything like that. They just felt very real to me. Mm-hmm. And there was a lot of just said just by facial expressions and stares. And I found that quite compelling.
A lot said, but what were they saying? I just didn't get a message from any of it.
For me, there was sort of... I mean, you could perhaps call it self-pity, but sort of bemoaning their lot. But the way I interpreted it was that it seems a bit silly to say this about Anatolia, given that Anatolia is the majority of Turkey. Mm-hmm. But I think the idea is more that it's in like the interior of Turkey, like that the steppes, the fairly small villages, and just the fairly barren-looking grasslands about. It kind of actually, to me, had a similar feel to how Patagonia tends to be represented in film. I have the feeling it's a similar sort of lifestyle there, similar sort of feeling. And I've liked a lot of films set in Patagonia, actually. And it's maybe something to do with that kind of desolate nature that you mentioned yourself too, at least in terms of aesthetics. You liked how it looked. But yeah, there's a particular fairly hard type of life in there. It produces a certain type of people. There's kind of like a dead end nature to life in that place, and that's perhaps what the characters are experiencing, and that they don't really see a way out for themselves, plus with a wee bit of the kind of old ways of life passing away, which is what that village represents. And other than that, I just liked that the characters were just kind of, they felt really real in a lot of ways. And there's a couple of scenes too, where it's both in the same section, but once they've exhumed the body and they're preparing to move it to the hospital for the autopsy, and they've forgotten the body bag, and it could quite easily become farce, that section.
It was.
Well, see,
they showed themselves up as a bunch of clueless morons.
See, I didn't feel like that. I saw it more as just like, yes, it's incompetence, but more because they're just not accustomed to doing this sort of thing, and it was just basic incompetence rather than farce. I could see that you might see that splitting hairs, but for me it felt quite distinct. But there's a few just sort of human scenes I really enjoyed. Like when they start getting onto this bit where the corpse looked like Clark Gable, he didn't, and the prosecutor looked like Carter Gable, he didn't, but they thought they did, so that's fine. And then so he gives a wee anecdote, and they start laughing and stuff. They kind of catches himself, realises where he is, and I'm like, yeah, that felt like, in that situation, if that real, that's exactly what would happen. It's like maybe slightly inappropriate, but they're doing a job that needs to be done. They're tired, but also some of them will have been through these motions before, so that's the kind of thing that happens. And I don't know, I just enjoyed the humanity of that scene. I can't really explain it any more than that. And I just got a lot out of this film. I just found it really interesting.
I did really like the 5-minute discussion about yogurt. That was a particular high point, I thought. I learned a lot from that. Yeah. Mainly about yogurt.
All those conversations in the car, I just really enjoyed. They're not really meaningful, but also it's exactly the sort of thing people would talk about in a car while they were travelling to a place that wasn't particularly exciting for them to get to.
Again, I don't disagree that any of it is showing realistic characters, but I know realistic characters in real life and they're boring, and so's a lot of this film.
Well, I can't actually argue with that, except that I didn't find them boring. I found them, I'm not sure interesting is quite the right word, but certainly engaging enough to want to see what's happening, to listen to them with interest. So I guess that would be interesting. Yeah, I'll stick to that word. It'll make things more straightforward. Yeah, so it seems I clearly got a great deal more out of that than you did.
Sadly, yes. I really was hoping for more, but I didn't get it, so Sylvie.